Hello guys, Growth is here. I normally don't talk about politics or news on this channel, but I couldn't help noticing that Ridley Scott has been warning us about the Epstein files throughout his entire career. From the dark corporation and alien that worships the Xenomorph to the morally decaying billionaire Peter Weyland in Prometheus, to the drug and human trafficking cartel seamlessly intertwined with the global banking system and the counselor, Ridley Scott exposes the same theme: deprived elites who operate above the law and treat human life as disposable. This becomes even more explicit in The Last Duel, one of his most overlooked films, where the ruling feudal class conspires to protect their own from rape accusations. And all of that sounds eerily similar to the Epstein files. The release of the Epstein files created a worldwide scandal. At the very least, they revealed the complete moral corruption of the so-called elites, including famous politicians and billionaires. And if some of the most disturbing allegations are true, then these corrupt elites allegedly engage in immoral and borderline satanic rituals. Obviously, everything in this video is alleged, speculative, and satirical. However, these files expose extremely disturbing conversations between some of the most influential people in the world. And that's exactly what Ridley Scott has been warning us about for nearly half a century. I'm not going deep into the Epstein files themselves, but what is clear, however, is that they suggest that many famous and influential figures, people we've known for decades, were morally corrupt, lying to millions while hiding their obscene behaviors. And if the allegations in the files are true, they point to a wide network of elites connected to human trafficking and other deeply disturbing crimes. So let's take a look at how Ridley Scott has been warning us about this in his films, and maybe that's why he was sidelined so many times in Hollywood for trying to expose the uncomfortable truths. Even in his first major film released almost 50 years ago, Alien of 1979, the moral corruption of the corporate overlords who run society seemed just as fantastical as the Xenomorph itself. But fast forward to today, it feels more and more like common knowledge. Although Alien is a horror movie, what's even more terrifying than the Xenomorph is that the most powerful corporation on Earth sees that creature as the perfect organism. Weyland-Yutani admires the Xenomorph precisely because of its lack of morality, as Ash famously describes. What made Alien so horrifying is that in this dark future, Weyland-Yutani effectively runs society on Earth, and the corporation is more terrifying than the monster itself. It has an explicit directive to treat the crew as expendable. When Ripley discovers this inhumane order, she breaks down in tears. She sort of loses her innocence because she has seen something she was never meant to see. 50 years ago, the evil and almost satanic nature of Weyland-Yutani seemed just as fictional and unbelievable as the alien creature itself. However, in the light of the Epstein files, it could be argued that Scott was warning us about the true nature of powerful corporate and political elites. And just like Ripley, perhaps we were never meant to know the truth. And that's why so many of the things alleged in the Epstein files are so hard to process. They are so atrocious that people almost do not want them to be real. Decades later, Scott returns to the alien universe with Prometheus, where the corrupt nature of the ruling class becomes even more explicit. We meet the trillionaire Peter Weyland, founder of Weyland Corp. The film shows how elites constantly lie and conceal their true motives, something exposed in the Epstein files. Peter Weyland secretly hides aboard the ship and conceals the real purpose of the mission. It was never about finding humanity's creators, it was all about extending his own life. So his greed overrides everything, and the film is filled with hidden agendas. Scientists and regular people are essentially psyoped into participating in this mission without fully understanding its true purpose and dangers. Weyland hates his own daughter and orders David to begin experimenting on the crew. So his lack of humanity is beyond comprehension, just like the stuff in the Epstein files. But most importantly, Prometheus suggests that those at the highest level of power, wealth, and influence are selfish, insatiable, and detached from human life, like Peter Weyland. Weyland sees himself as a god and ordinary humans as expendable. He risks destroying life on Earth with the pathogen to simply prolong his own life. What's even more peculiar is that Weyland orders to abuse Elizabeth Shaw right in front of the engineer, and the Epstein files allegations are all about abusing women and even children in the most obscene ways. Weyland believes that he will face no consequences for his actions. Similarly, many figures connected to the Epstein files appear to avoid accountability despite the seriousness of the allegations. In Prometheus, once the engineer sees what humanity has turned into, embodied by the corrupt and self-obsessed Peter Weyland, the engineer prepares to unleash a pathogen to destroy Earth. And that moment feels like Scott's own dark commentary on human corruption, as if our own creators have judged us unworthy of survival. In Alien Covenant, David, an advanced AI android, expresses the same bleak view of humanity. David says that humans are a dying species grasping for resurrection. They are leaving the Earth forever, but their power is an illusion. They do not deserve to start again, and I'm not going to let them. From that perspective, a purely rational actor like an AI trained on human history, behavior, and patterns of power might logically conclude that our species is unfit to govern itself, unworthy of its own agency, and perhaps even undeserving of survival. However, Scott reveals the corrupt and criminal nature of the ruling class even more explicitly in two of his other films, The Counselor and The Last Duel. Many of Scott's films were way ahead of their time, revealing disturbing themes audiences were just not yet ready to confront. And this could explain why many of his movies are misunderstood or overlooked. For example, The Counselor was forgotten and almost ridiculed because it portrayed banks, cartels, legal systems, and global finance as interconnected parts of one massive criminal organization operating above the law. People at the time just didn't buy it, but now it seems more relevant than ever. The film follows a successful lawyer who naively enters a drug trade for a quick profit. However, what he encounters is not a chaotic street crime, but a meticulously organized system of violence. The movie depicts a world dominated by a criminal, ultra-wealthy elite. At that time, it wasn't believable that all these governing systems are connected and corrupt, but that's exactly what the Epstein files show. Just as the banks and the counselor are portrayed as deeply entangled with cartels and organized crime, Jeffrey Epstein was a mysterious financier with an unexplained source of wealth who was connected to individuals at the highest levels of the corporate world, the military, government, and global finance. But one of the most disturbing scenes in The Counselor shows criminals dissolving bodies in barrels filled with acid. When the film came out, many people dismissed this as absurd and unrealistic. However, the files suggest that in 2018, after the FBI launched its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, the exact same day he purchased 330 gallons of sulfuric acid for his island. Sulfuric acid is known to destroy the evidence often collected for investigations, as well as nearly all organic matter, including flesh. So in the movie, once the counselor enters this world of elite criminal capital, he cannot escape it. The system is self-protecting and merciless, and that's precisely what the Epstein files appear to expose as well. A self-protecting and corrupt class, insulated from consequences. Ridley Scott develops this theme even further in The Last Duel, which in my opinion is one of his best films, yet it was largely overlooked as well. I would even argue that this is one of the strongest films of the last few decades. The core of the story centers on allegations of rape made by Marguerite de Carouge, a noblewoman. However, because the accused rapist Jacques Legris is a close friend of a feudal lord, the courts and the elite dismiss the allegations and conspire against Marguerite and her husband, Sir Jean de Carouge, attempting to silence them and portray Marguerite as a liar. Another disgusting element of the film is the immoral behavior of the feudal lord and his circle, who frequently engage in orgies and obscene excesses. They resent and hate Sir Jean because he does not participate in their degenerate parties and appears more principled. So the parallels to what was exposed in the Epstein files are striking, as if Ridley Scott was suggesting that this type of corruption has existed for centuries. In the film, the feudal lord and other elites conspire to discredit Sir Jean and his wife. The conflict then escalates to the King of France himself, which ultimately leads to a duel to the death between Jacques Legris and Sir Jean de Carouge. At its core, the entire movie portrays corrupt and immoral elites attempting to escape justice for their sexual abuse. And interestingly, this almost perfectly mirrors the Epstein files. And what is perhaps even more troubling than the files themselves is the apparent cover-up that followed. Given the seriousness of the allegations and the number of individuals involved, one would expect a massive investigation and meaningful accountability. Yet that doesn't seem to be happening at all, much like the self-protecting elites depicted in The Last Duel. So throughout his career, Ridley Scott appears to have warned us about the Epstein files, exposing the corrupt and immoral nature of the ruling classes in society. But the real question is whether his films were genuine warnings or something even darker like the predictive programming. There is a theory that by putting all these messages about the corrupt elites in the films, the Hollywood was actually preparing people to accept the disturbing truth. In the movies, the Hollywood presents these corrupt and immoral elites as fictional villains, evil and disturbing, but claiming that it's just a story and these are just made-up characters. But nonetheless, the idea enters public consciousness framed as entertainment, and even though it's presented as fiction, that idea slowly solidifies in people's minds. And in a twisted way, people get used to seeing these ruling elites like that, evil and corrupt. So strangely enough, these ideas become more and more accepted in the public consciousness because we've seen it so many times in the movies. So when the Epstein files come out, exposing the real corruption, the real moral decay, people accept it more easily because they've seen it so many times. They've been pre-programmed for it in the movies. And that theory could be true because even though the Epstein files created a worldwide scandal, at the end of the day, people just swallowed it and moved on despite the seriousness of the allegations. So what do you guys think about the Epstein files and the fact that we've been given clues about them in the movies? Leave your thoughts in the comments and join the Patreon if you really want to help the channel. Also, like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video.